Hello, BookTube. I've ventured down into puppy territory for another test of technology. I'm testing this phone still to see what size videos I can record on it, whether or not the difference in size makes a difference in whether or not the video will upload, all that sort of stuff. It's starting to look to me like under optimal conditions, none of my recording options actually looks dramatically better or worse than any of the others. And that would be great because my goal is to have many options in case something just up and fails. So we're gonna try a slightly longer video this time around. I think it'll probably be longer, and just go through one whole shelf of biographies down here in puppy territory and see where that leads us. The first one being a paperback of the London Journal of James Boswell, the famous biographer of Samuel Johnson, but he was also an indefatigable writer in his own right, wrote all the time. And his London Journal is just fantastic. It's just incredibly entertaining. I'm not really sure why it's not as popular as his Life of Johnson. It's, first of all, much easier to get through and much shorter in a nice scholarly abridgment. This one's from Yale by John Wayne. I don't understand why it's not his most popular book, but I love it. I go back to this volume all the time. Then the next one is a lovely finished copy of Music in the Castle of Heaven. This is John Eliot Gardner's great biography and musical biography of Johann Sebastian Bach. Just an incredible volume. It's very pretty. First of all, it's got the deckled edges and the gold gilt on the cover and all. But Gardner is such a great critic of Bach's work. I mean, Bach's life has probably the details of his actual day-to-day, month-to-month civilian life maybe have been told better. There's one gigantic German biography I don't think has ever been translated into English that probably does a more exhaustive job than this. But the key when you're writing a biography of a composer is how well you deal with the music. I would think we shall see. It's always the bugaboo that I run across. Like, for instance, one of the books that I'm most eagerly waiting for in the fall, one that I somehow haven't got yet, is a big new biography of George Frederick Handel in London, during his time in London. And I'm Handel's biggest fan. and again, with a thing like that, it will come down to whether or not the writer of the biography understands the music, can write about it sympathetically. If you read a biography of a composer, and you end it not wanting to listen to that composer, something's wrong with the biography, I would think. But I could be wrong about that. This next one is problematic, of course. This is Gita Sereni's Albert Speer, His Battle with the Truth. This is a UK edition from Macmillan. There is our author talking with Albert Speer. This is a big biography of a literal architect of the Nazi regime, someone who did, as you can see on the cover, lots and lots of in-depth planning with Hitler as to what the Nazi regime would look like, how it presents itself to the world. And he did a number on Gita Sereni and most of the rest of the world in the wake of Germany's defeat. He did a number. There were a coveted number, a small allotment of spots for the quote-unquote good Nazi. It was a testament, I think, to the national forbearance of the Western powers that they kind of wanted to find at least one noble villain, at least one person who wasn't just an out-and-out pathetic monster. I think many of the victors felt that would ennoble the victory, and he made it his life's work to be that person. It's a total fraud. He was. Blood on his hands all the way up to his collarbones. But nevertheless, this book is beautifully written. Just a fantastic book, no matter what. I don't think I agree with more than 10 pages of it. But next one is the greatest book ever written on President Warren Harding, The Shadow of Blooming Grove. Big atmospheric treatment, just his whole life, his political career, and also the surrounding times that were slightly insane. Nothing compared to the 21st century, but still, his times were slightly insane. And I don't know. I sometimes think he was too. And this is in that hypothetical ideal library of U.S. presidential writing, this is essential on Harding. Absolutely essential. Don't know that I've read a Harding biography that's better. There hasn't been one in the big 1,000-page popular Random House, Viking Macmillan treatment in a surprising amount of time, considering all there is to write about. Okay. All right, next is himself, Theodore Rex by Edmund Morris. This is the second volume of Edmund Morris's trilogy on Theodore Roosevelt. This is Roosevelt in Power. And it's my favorite of the three volumes. You have to get used to Morris's style. He's a very scrupulous researcher. He employs a bunch of good people. He's also a beautiful, beautiful writer. But he can get a little loopy. he can make artistic and conceptual lunges that exceed his grasp, and I think that's an admirable thing in an author. I don't mind that at all. It's just the only problem is that when I read books like this, a part of me is always thinking, well, okay, what about a reader who comes to this without ever having read anything about Theodore Roosevelt before? If you have 6 books on your shelf about Theodore Roosevelt and you know him through these books, then you'll be ready for the conceptual dipsy doodles that sometimes happen. But if you were coming at this straight, I don't know. I've often said that I would, much as I love this book, I would probably recommend a different Theodore Roosevelt biography for someone who was coming at it cold. But then again, keep in mind, we shouldn't come at it cold, right? Spend an hour on Wikipedia and related linked articles. Spend an hour there. If you're coming into a big biographical or historical subject, spend an hour. This is not spoilers. This is not giving away the end of the latest Scream movie. Get your grounding first, and then you'll be ready. Anyway, what have we... Oh, okay. All right, well, I'm seeing a theme on the shelf here, and this one definitely isn't part of that theme. I'm seeing a theme of U.S. presidents. This is Martha Babcock Amory's big old biography of John Singleton Copley, a great American painter. And now I'm wondering if maybe I nominated the wrong book in an earlier book tag as my oldest book. Because this is looking mighty old. How old is this? No, it's not. This is 1882. This is 1882. This is just a soup to nuts biography of Copley. I have this, and I was overjoyed when a year or two ago there was a modern biography of Copley. And now, oddly enough, I'm pretty sure I no longer have that modern biography. I think I probably sent it to somebody. So I just have the older one. Nothing has changed. Copley is still dead. But even so, I need to find that newer one somewhere. Okay, we've seen this before. This is Samuel Flagg Bemis. This is John Quincy Adams and the Union. Not a full-scale biography of John Quincy Adams. There are plenty of those. There was a raft of them a few years ago, all at once, all in 1 year. But still, a fantastic book on a conceptual nub at the heart of John Quincy Adams' life, of his idea about preserving the Union and also about freedom, individual freedom. Just an amazingly eloquent book. The author has blurbs from Arthur Schlesinger, Basil Rausch, Dumas Malone, and was a heck of a guy. he was a heck of a guy. Massachusetts born and raised. And then the next one is also a presidential biography and also a great one. This is Margaret Leach's In the Days of McKinley. She's much, much more famous for a book about Woodrow Wilson called Reveille in Washington. But this is a great book. You read something like this, it's a big book on McKinley, and when you read it, and you're just blown away by the huge, stately periods of her prose. I don't think anyone writes like this anymore, and that's a shame. Although I think probably modern attention spans have migrated away from reading stuff like this. But boy, oh boy, you look at this thing with its marble exterior and it's old, and you'll see it at a yard sale without a dust jacket and it'll be all dusty and moldy and whatnot, smell like somebody's attic, and you won't have any idea the glories inside, the amazing reading experience on the inside. But the next one is also a biography, a presidential biography, but it's modern. It's Stuart Eisenstat's biography of his former boss, President Jimmy Carter. This is just a really just a look at a big, very satisfyingly detailed look at Carter's time in the Oval Office. And it bears some feeling of partisanship. Of course, it could hardly do otherwise. Carter tended to invoke in the people who really liked him a very a very high degree of loyalty, and Eizenstat was one of those people, and he makes no secret of it in this book. I think the book does a much better job than a lot of its critics say of being objective, of setting Carter's strengths against his weaknesses. For as far as I'm concerned, it's. I guess this is going to be a pattern. Wie geht's, meine Schatzi? It's all right. They're watching for you anyway. Oh, hello. Hello, I know. I'm in your territory. As I was saying, not that any of you are paying any attention, I think that presidential biographies written by partisans get a bad rap. They have since the Kennedy administration. I think that most of the critics who go on at great length, I mean, if you're at a review of the book, you have to mention it. But if you go on at great lengths, and especially if you get on your high horse and windify about how it completely destroys your objectivity, I always wonder how those men, and it's always men, would feel if someone said the same thing about them. That some subject that you were involved with, you've now written a book about it, but obviously you can't be objective. I don't buy that at all. I think objectivity should be on the page, not in the biography. It should be, is this objective? Is this fair or not? I think if you use a yardstick like that, most of the so-called court historians for John F. Kennedy pass with flying colors. These were people with high morals and intellectual scrupulousness, and they were writing books, most of them in the white-hot grief for a man who would have scorned before anybody else a book that lied. So I don't mind that Eizenstat worked for Carter at all. I think the book makes the book extra valuable. Then this next one's by somebody who I don't think any of his employees are still alive. This is Ken White's book about Herbert Hoover, and it also was one of 2 or 3 new studies of Hoover, big detailed studies of Hoover. I think this is the only one I kept because this was by far the best one. Just wonderfully done. Doesn't really. I mean, the aim of all of these books, of all these new Hoover books, was to sort of renovate his reputation. And they do, and it's certainly possible to do. He was an amazing person, an amazing managerial organizer. And certainly the point that's made in this book and the point that's made in the other Hoover book from a couple of years ago are absolutely true, that in terms of catastrophe relief, debt relief, famine relief, in wake of war and in time of scarcity, on an organizational level, he saved more lives than almost any other single American. But none of that changes the fact that it was on his watch the Great Depression happened. That is, fair or not, that is going to haunt you forever. And when authors try too hard to deny that, it gets a little bit on the silly side. Then we're back to President McKinley. This is Robert Mary's relatively, I think this was a couple of years ago, last year, a brilliant book on President McKinley. Not as beautifully written as in the days of McKinley, not even close, but sifting more facts and with greater hindsight, of course. So a 21st century reappraisal of President McKinley. I thought this was amazingly good. One of the ones that the year that this came out, there were like 25 presidential biographies, and this was one of the ones I kept. I didn't keep them all, or it would have been a whole bookcase. This is John Meacham's biography of Thomas Jefferson. A very, very good treatment. I railed against it when I first read it, and then I thought about it and realized it does its job. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, and it's not partisan. And I liked it quite a bit. I think we're living in a golden age of presidential biographies. Okay, including this next one, which was the most unlikely aspect of a golden age you could possibly imagine. This is by Scott Greenberger, and it's his biography of Chester A. Arthur, an American president that those of you who are not in America will never have heard of. In fact, most Americans will never have heard of Chester A. Arthur. And this author does his level best to make Chester A. Arthur's story a heroic one. that this was a fop, a trimmer, a total fraud, totally corrupt, just hand out to any donor in the world until he became president, and then all of a sudden he realized a backbone. I don't know that I believe that at all, but what a book! What an entertaining book! What have we got next here? Oh goodness gracious! All right. Okay, this is from Cambridge University Press. This is William Howard Taft, The Travails of a Progressive Conservative. This is by Jonathan Lurie, who certainly does his best, but look at it. The size of it. It's tiny. Absolutely tiny. One of the controversies or victories or losses of Taft's time in office should take up that much space. One of them. So this is, I liked it, of course. I love seeing a major press do a Taft book, but it wasn't anywhere near comprehensive. Okay, this is the University of Kansas Press. This is from quite some time ago. It doesn't have a dust jacket. This is by Paulo Coletta, and it is The Presidency of William Howard Taft. There's a series of books, so you can get this on almost any president, and obviously because if you can get it on Taft, you can get it on almost anybody. Just a study of his presidency, something that you want to read in context with other books, like this one, Lewis Gould's William Howard Taft Presidency. This is just the presidency of William Howard Taft. Again, look at the size of it. That's nobody's presidency unless you count somebody who dies in 33 days. And then this one is also by Lewis Gould, the same guy who wrote the William Howard Taft Presidency. This is Chief Executive to Chief Justice. Taft betwixt the White House and the Supreme Court. There he is, out of office. And this is the time he spent in between his two most famous appointments. Let's leave out any mention of the word betwixt. Okay, let's just bury that in diplomatic silence. Okay, this next one's not a U.S. president. This is Lyndall Roper's Martin Luther, Renegade and Prophet, a new biography of Luther that did not annoy me. Most of them do. And this one I thought was very good. I have it here, but I'm willing to bet that in my biography collection at the moment, I do not own a copy of Ronald Baton's Here I Stand, another great, even better biography of Martin Luther from 60, 70 years ago. I wish I did. The next time I see it in a hardcover, I will grab it. Then what do we got here? Oh, good. Okay. This is Gene Edward Smith's biography of President Grant, General Ed President Grant. That impressed me when it first came out. That would have been in the early 2000s. Yes, early 2000s. 2001. It impressed me when it first came out because for the first time, this was an author, a writer, who made the case to me that perhaps the standard interpretation of Grant as a president, total corrupt, total inept, totally incompetent, might have been a product of Southern propaganda and might not have been objectively real. I had just believed that until I read this book. This book actually makes a really strong case for Grant the president, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. It totally changed my mind on the subject. So I do recommend it. There are tons and tons of... What you doing? No, Frida. I'm just making a video. That's all. I'm in puppet territory, so this was inevitable. Oh, Caleb will be happy. No. Then this next one is, I've seen it on other booktube channels, and I hugely recommend it. This also is by Edmund Morris. This is the first of his books, The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt, it takes him all the way up to the death of President McKinley. It takes him all the way up to the time, the unexpected event that propelled him into the Oval Office. And it's wonderful. I just love it. The opening chapter is like a snapshot of Roosevelt's time in the White House, is bravura, and it just goes on from there. This is really the story of this boy, weak-chested, asthmatic, working in the shadow of a tremendously charismatic father who decided to just figure out life, just make his own way. And it also, Morris does such a great job of telling the heartbreak that Theodore Roosevelt had to live through, losing his first wife and his mother. And his time. This also includes his time ranching. It's just a larger than life story, and here it is in a great telling. This one is modern. This is by the same guy who did the Grant biography. This is Gene Edward Smith's biography of George W. Bush, which when I first heard about it, I thought, no, there's no way. There's no way. The blood is still up. We have men and women in harm's way right now because of this man. Still, you can't write a book about ongoing wars. But this book impressed me. It really did. I thought it was not only much better than I expected it to be, but really genuinely good. It surprised me. It really did. And it wasn't the only Bush biography of its kind to do that. We'll see. So this next one, I mentioned when I was talking about Edmund Morris that he's sometimes capable of loopiness, of slight imaginative overreach. This book is that. This book crystallizes that, brings it right to the fore, surprised everybody who'd never read the man before because all of a sudden they were encountering it for the first time. This is his official biography of Ronald Reagan. And you can see the strangeness right at the beginning, a memoir of Ronald Reagan. He was hired to write the official biography of Ronald Reagan, not a memoir. And boy, oh boy, is this a strange book. It's just weird. It just is. It's beautiful. I think the most beautiful thing that Edmund Morris has ever written. And when I finished it, and when I was becoming aware of the outrage in the critical world about the liberalities that this book takes with the truth and with literality, all I could think was, if I were president, I would be incredibly honored to have this book done in my name, to have it laid at the feet of my reputation. It's an amazing work. It just isn't like any other official American biography ever written, or ever likely to be written. It's those of you who read it will know what I mean. But it has many, let's put it euphemistically, it has many, many fictional elements. But then again, as I pointed out to people over and over when this was all anybody could talk about, so did Reagan. Reagan also had very many fictional elements. Anyway, I love reading about the Reagan administration, and Bob Spitz's book. I finally got around to reading Bob Spitz's big 1,000-page biography of Reagan that comes out in a couple of months, and it's fantastic. But this is indispensable. Again, not much like with Theodore Rex, I wouldn't advise this if you've never read anything about Reagan and don't know anything about him. But if you lived through the Reagan years and you haven't read this book, you really should. Yes, it's amazing. And this next one is not the president of some kind. Oh no, this is Walter Jackson Bates' biography of John Keats, which it's one of his two great biographies. He did one of Samuel Johnson that's also great. And this one it's fantastic. I think it's the best single volume on Keats. But when I found a hardcover for free, like at some sort of giveaway or something or other. But it had just a boring marooned cover. That's all. It was just solid maroon. I thought, I can do better than that. So I went and found pictures. I found a stained glass, a pre-Raphaelite stained glass window of John Keats for the cover, and then a lovely statue of a permanently youthful boy for the spine. I just remade the spine and the spine and the dust jacket that way. But boy, the book, if you have access to the Keats, Bate is great anyway. He's one of those biographers where you're reading him and you're thinking, even while you're reading, you're thinking, boy, oh boy, am I in good hands. and that is especially helpful with a complex figure like Keats. Then we're back to biographies. This is David McCullough's John Adams. This is, I think, a foreign printing of Simon & Schuster because it's much bigger than the hardcover, the American hardcover. So that's what I'm thinking. I don't know why I have this. I've had many copies throughout the ages. This is, of course, the butt of a joke of mine that is actually true. One of the reasons why I codified one of my personal rules: don't get me a book. If you're thinking about getting me a present, don't get me a book. One of the reasons I codified that is because the year that this came out, what was that? The late 90s? 2001. The year that this came out, I got 35 copies of this book from 35 different people who didn't know each other, who all thought, I need to get Steve a present, walked into the local bookstore, saw this stacked up to the ceiling, and thought, oh, he likes old people, he likes periwigs, he likes biographies. So that's what gave me the impetus to really make that a motto. Don't get me a book. But this is really good. I really liked it. It's not my favorite John Adams biography, but I think it's my favorite David McCullough book. And I think I liked the extra size of it, as dumb as that is. I think I do. Then this next one is another John Meacham book and another Bush book. This is his book, Destiny and Power, his biography of George H.W. Bush, who also, I would have thought, was an equivocal figure, somebody you couldn't be objective about. But this book is not objective. He spent a lot of time at Kennebunkport. He spent a lot of time in the various Bush compounds. He spent a lot of time with George H.W. Bush. And this is, as a result, an extremely sympathetic biography of a person who, I'm perfectly okay with the goodwill that he has accrued in the meantime, but this is a person about whom many, many negative biographies could be written and have been written. But I loved it anyway. I thought it was really, really good. Again, you need to know the whole picture in order to really like it. So I'm not sure that I would trust this to someone reading it for the first time, knowing nothing about George H.W. Bush. But one way or another, I thought it was Meacham at his best. Meacham doing a really good job on a subject in a context that I didn't think that was possible. And then we're almost at the end here. This is the last of our presidential biographies for this shelf. This is Amity Shale's biography of Calvin Coolidge, Silent Cal. And I thought it was tremendous. This came out before the raft of presidential biographies. This came out in 2013. But it's the best Coolidge book. Not that that's hard. It's the trick here is making Coolidge interesting for any length of time, much less 500 pages. This book actually does it. It's the Coolidge book to have. And then this last one at the end here is obviously not a U.S. president. Okay. This is Mike Langford's book, Becoming Leonardo. About Leonardo da Vinci, and you might think, on this shelf alone, there are probably 5 Leonardo biographies, and there have been 500. You might think, okay, it's one more, but what a book. So impressionistic, so passionately, beautifully written. Even in the huge glut of books on Leonardo da Vinci, this is one to have. I cannot recommend it strongly enough, no matter what. Especially, in this case, especially if you're coming to it without knowing anything about Leonardo da Vinci. This is amazing. I went into it completely jaundiced, thinking, oh, another Leonardo book, wonderful. How boring is this going to be? And it blew me away. So great. We end on a high note, because that is the end. That is the end of this bookshelf. And it looks like all the recording happened just fine, and you got your requisite Frida photo bomb. Now we'll see about the uploading. Now we'll see about that part and whether or not you ever see this. And if you do, then maybe we'll be in business for book tours again. That would be great. I don't think I need more than 1 or 2 tests. So I'll wrap this up for now, and we'll keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully you'll see this soon. Thank you, BookTube.